There is a lot that we don't know about serial killers. We don't know what drives them to kill innocent people, how they can get any pleasure from it at all, or how many of them go undetected for months, years, or decades. In some cases, we don't know exactly how many people they killed, meaning that the families of their victims often go without justice. And while some serial killers love to brag about their crimes, some will never confess to the true extent of their depravity, which leaves many to speculate how many innocent lives they have taken and who their victims might be. And that's exactly what we will be discussing today as we uncover the cases that are possibly connected to Christopher Halliwell. Hello and welcome to the 48th episode of the Uncovered True Crime podcast. My name is Stephanie, and each week we uncover a different unsolved true crime case, ranging from missing persons, unsolved murders, Jane and John Does, and suspicious deaths. You can listen to the podcast on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcast streaming apps, as well as on YouTube by searching Uncover True Crime. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at uncover_pod, on Instagram at Uncover True Crime Pod, and you can join the Uncover True Crime discussion group on Facebook. But without any further ado, let's uncover the crimes that are possibly connected to Christopher Halliwell. Christopher Halliwell was born in 1964 and was raised by his mother and stepfather in the town of Swindon, located in southwest England. According to the New York Inquirer, he was abused by his mum and stepdad, which led to very troubling behaviour. His sister Sarah said, quote, "He was just not a normal child. I have witnessed things he did at first hand and it was very unpleasant. He loved trapping spiders and butterflies and taking his time to pull off their legs and wings one by one. It was like a hobby to him and he showed no emotion while he was doing it. He always lived in a strange world of his own. He was a very cold, detached person who could never handle normal relationships. If you ever had a go at him, he would just stare you out with those vile eyes and say nothing," unquote. He eventually ended up in the foster care system, and after he left school at 18, he turned to a life of crime. He started stealing cars and burglarising houses, crimes that he would eventually be imprisoned for in 1985. During his time in prison, he supposedly told his cellmate that he had strangled a woman during sex and, quote, "she would not be having sex with anyone else," unquote. He allegedly became very irate when asked if he had actually killed this woman, but did ask questions like how many people he would have to kill to be defined as a serial killer, and he would also read books and magazines on the subject. He apparently had a particular interest in the Moors murders and in Myra Hindley. He had a girlfriend when he went to prison, but she broke up with him while he was on the inside. While I don't know what year she split up with him, I do know that it was on the 19th of March, which will become very significant later on in the episode. He was released from prison in 1987 at 23 years old. He married a woman called Lisa a few years later, and the pair went on to have 3 children together. Their marriage was said to be rough from the beginning, probably due to the fact that by his own admission, Christopher would regularly hire sex workers, and they divorced in 2005. At this time, he went from job to job and eventually opened his own chauffeur business, although it wasn't very successful. He was declared bankrupt in 2011 and began working as a taxi driver, which is a job he was doing when he would be arrested for the murders of Shan O'Callaghan and Becky Godden. Becky Godden was 20 years old when she was last seen getting into a taxi in January 2003. Becky was a sex worker and Christopher is known to be one of her regular clients, and he, quote, "became besotted with her," unquote. The exact date of Becky's death is unknown, as her family assumed that she had moved to Bristol to start a new life and didn't report her missing until 4 years later in 2007. Becky's body wasn't found for another 4 years after that, in 2011, while police were searching for the body of another young woman. Shan O'Callaghan was born on the 3rd of June 1988 and was 23 years old when she went missing after a night out on the 19th of March 2011. She was last seen getting into a taxi outside the Suju nightclub at 10 to 3 in the morning. Her family and boyfriend became very concerned when she didn't return to her boyfriend's house that night as she had planned, and their fear only intensified when they saw that Shan hadn't logged into Facebook, which was very unusual for her. Her boyfriend, Kevin Reap, reported her missing at 9:45 a.m. the next day, and police immediately started investigating her disappearance. They checked her phone's location and saw that it had pinged in Severnake Forest, 12 miles from the club where she was last seen. The ping came from a text that she had sent her boyfriend 30 minutes after leaving the nightclub, so police knew that she would have to have gotten there by car to have travelled 12 miles in 30 minutes. Police checked CCTV and released photos of a green Toyota Avensis that they were looking for in connection with their investigation, which also happened to be the same type of car as Christopher's taxi. Police arrested Christopher on the 24th of March, and while I can't find any exact information on what forensic evidence they had linking him to her murder, he did confess to killing both Shan and Becky. However, this confession was not admissible in court because of how DS Stephen Fulcher got it. After arresting Christopher, he did not drive him to the police station. Instead, he drove Christopher to a field and somehow got him to confess to killing both Shan and Becky. He has since claimed that his reason for doing this was because he thought that there was a possibility that Shan could be alive and he just wanted Christopher to tell him where she was. As the investigation was highly improper and Christopher's rights were not read to him, nor was he given the option to consult a solicitor, the confession was in violation of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984. However, as a result of this confession, he was able to lead police directly to Shan and Becky's bodies. When he was interrogated at the police station, he said that he was a, quote, sick fucker, unquote, and asked, quote, is it too late to get help? I know you're not a psychiatrist, but what the fuck is wrong with me? Normal people don't go around killing each other. Unquote. DS Steve Fulcher was found guilty of gross misconduct, and while he was reprimanded by the police force, he kept his job but has since retired. Christopher pled guilty to murdering Shan, but claimed that his confession to Becky's murder was false. He represented himself at trial but was still found guilty and was given a whole life tariff, on top of the 25 years he was given for Shan's murder, meaning that he will probably be in prison for the rest of his life. DS Stephen Fulcher has written a book on Christopher Halliwell and other murders he believed that Christopher may have committed. In case anyone is interested in reading it, the book is called Catching a Serial Killer: My Hunt for Murderer Christopher Halliwell. As he and others have pointed out, it is very unusual for serial killers to start killing in their late 30s, which is how old Christopher was when he killed Becky. They usually start a lot younger than that. Also, there were several details about his confession to Becky's murder, which led Stephen Fulcher to believe that he had killed more than just 2 people he is convicted of. When Stephen asked Christopher if he had killed anyone other than Becky and Shan, he replied, quote, isn't two enough, unquote, and never actually denied being involved in other murders. Also, he couldn't pinpoint exactly when he had killed Becky, saying that it was sometime between 2003 and 2005, but was able to lead them directly to where he had buried her. Surely, if this was his first murder, he would remember the year at the very least, unless it wasn't, and he couldn't remember the year as he had in fact killed many other women. He also said that Becky's body was under 5 feet of soil, however she was found in an 8-inch grave. Was he getting her murder confused with someone else's? This is very possible since this is not the only detail of Becky's murder that he got wrong. He never mentioned that he had removed Becky's head post-mortem, which would have obviously been a very important aspect of the crime, and he also alluded to the fact that there are other people buried in White Horse Hill, stating, quote, who knows what or who you will find buried out there. There could be loads of people over the years, unquote. He also tried to get police to agree to never interrogate him about other crimes. Why would he do this if he had nothing else to hide? Perhaps most damning of all is that when police found Becky and Shan in the exact place where Christopher said they would be, 60 items were also found buried and only 2 of them have been identified as belonging to anybody. One of them was Becky's high-heeled boots, and the other was Shan's cardigan. While it is not unusual to find lost or discarded items of clothing in the woods, 60 seems like a lot, and I can't understand why they would be buried if they had simply been lost or discarded. Stephen Fulcher thinks that they are trophies for other crimes that he could have committed, and I think he might be right, but police have never linked him or the items to any other murders, or even released any images of the items found. Although the Wiltshire police do seem open to the idea that Christopher has more victims, as in 2017 they searched 2 properties on Broad Street where he used to live, but, quote, found nothing of significant interest, unquote. But if he does have other victims, who are they? Some people believe that he killed Claudia Lawrence, a woman who went missing from Yorkshire on the 19th of March 2009. I covered her case in episode 29 of the podcast, so I'm not going to do a deep dive into this case. However, there are a couple of details that I got wrong in that episode, so I want to clear them up now. In that episode, I stated that Christopher lived close to Claudia's father, but I have since learned that Christopher's father lived close to Claudia, which makes more sense. It would give Christopher more reason to be in the part of Yorkshire where Claudia lived, which was over 200 miles away from his own home in Swindon. I also stated that Christopher was a taxi driver in the area, and while he was indeed a taxi driver at the time, he lived in Swindon, not Yorkshire. I do apologise for these inaccuracies in my coverage of the case. As Christopher's father and Claudia lived in the same area, it is possible that Christopher was in Yorkshire visiting his father at the time and went looking for more victims, and stumbled across Claudia Lawrence walking to work. Claudia is thought to have been harmed early in the morning on the 19th of March after she left her house to go to work around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. It's possible that Christopher pulled up in his taxi and offered Claudia a ride to work. Whether she accepted this ride or not, Christopher could have kidnapped her or lured her somewhere quiet and killed her then. I would also be very interested to know if a Caramore backpack, a set of chef's whites, hair straighteners or a Samsung D900 were some of the items found in Whitehorse Hill, as these were the items that Claudia was known to have on her when she disappeared, and they have never been located. Although it is important to mention that no one knows exactly what Claudia was wearing when she went missing, so it is possible that her clothes were discovered on Whitehorse Hill but haven't been linked to her case yet. I also would be interested to know if Christopher Halliwell was a left-handed smoker, as 2 separate witnesses saw a woman matching Claudia's description arguing with a man on the route that she would have taken to work. Apart from the fact that the man was said to be a left-handed smoker, he was described as being around 5'6", very skinny, and was wearing a dark-coloured hooded top with the hood pulled up and dark-coloured combat trousers with pockets on the side. I don't know what height Christopher Halliwell is, although from photos he does appear to be quite tall, and he definitely appears to be quite skinny. This proves nothing obviously, but as I said in Claudia's episode, this theory makes the most sense to me as to what may have happened to her. Another interesting link between Claudia and Christopher is the date that Claudia is thought to have gone missing. While Claudia was last seen alive on the 18th of March 2009, it is thought that she was harmed on her way to work on the 19th, the same day that Christopher was dumped by his ex-girlfriend when he was in prison, the same day he killed Shan O'Callaghan, and the same day that another woman he knew disappeared. On the 19th of March 2002, 41-year-old Linda Razzel dropped off her 4 children, Emma, Robin, Matthew and Catherine, at their school in Swindon, before dropping her boyfriend off at his job. She then parked her car on Alvescott Road to walk to her job at Swindon College, where she was employed as a learning support assistant. Panic was raised later that day when she didn't collect her children from school, so she was reported missing. I do want to point out that I am not entirely sure why the alarm wasn't raised when she didn't arrive for her shift that day, but police do believe that she was abducted right after she parked her car, as her mobile phone was found down a nearby alleyway. Police searched for Linda but with no success. They released CCTV images of her last known movements, and her boyfriend made an emotional appeal for information. Another person who made a public appeal for her to return home was her soon-to-be ex-husband, Glenn Razzel. The two were going through quite a contentious divorce at the time, and there was possibly violence in their relationship, as just weeks before her disappearance, Glenn was acquitted of assaulting Linda. According to him, they had an argument and Linda stood in the doorway to stop him from leaving, so he, quote, gently grabbed her arm, unquote, which then accidentally went through a pane of glass. Glenn's account of his wife's disappearance kept changing, and some of what he told police was outright lies, including what he had been wearing that day. Police believe that Glenn killed Linda to get out of a nasty divorce settlement, and out of anger as she had his bank accounts frozen as he failed to make child maintenance payments. Due to this, and spots of her blood being found in the boot of his car, Glenn was charged with Linda's murder 2 months after she disappeared. He pled not guilty but was convicted of the murder on the 15th of November 2003. He has always maintained his innocence and has tried to appeal his conviction twice, although both attempts failed. People who believe he is innocent cite the fact that it took police 3 searches of his car to find the blood spot in the boot, leading to speculation that it was deliberately planted by police. This doesn't seem right to me, because how would they have had her blood to plant in the first place? Although in saying that, it seemed as though the Crown Prosecution Service hung its entire case on this bloodstain, and I don't understand that either. As it took the police 3 searches of the car to find the spot of blood, I imagine it would have been quite a small amount. And we don't know for a fact that this car wasn't both of theirs when they were a couple. Even if Glenn bought the car after he and Linda split up, as I've already said, there possibly was violence in their relationship, so I personally think it's very possible that this tiny spot of blood came from a separate incident between the pair, where they perhaps got into a fight, or Glenn assaulted her beside or close to the car, and that's how her blood ended up in the boot. While this doesn't paint Glenn in a great light, it's possible. And while I am by no means excusing violence of any kind, I don't think that such a small amount of blood proves that he killed her, and there is no other physical evidence connecting Glenn to Linda's disappearance. While I am not convinced of his innocence either, there is a very compelling alternative theory of the crime, that Christopher Halliwell was involved. See, not long before she disappeared, Christopher had been doing building work in her house, and according to Linda's friend Sandy Johnston, he was obsessed with Linda and continued to stalk her after the work was completed. I don't know if Sandy witnessed the stalking for herself or if Lisa told her that he was stalking her. However, this is a very hard crime to prove, especially if the alleged victim of the stalking is not here to confirm details of the crime to the police. Although it does seem like a huge coincidence that Christopher and Linda knew each other and that she went missing on a day that seems to have particular significance to him. Stephen Fulcher, the same man who improperly interrogated Christopher during the Shan O'Callaghan and Becky Godden investigation, is convinced that Christopher had something to do with Linda's disappearance, and he told Radio 4, quote, "We know that Halliwell has killed women, has a propensity for killing women, and had a direct relationship with Linda Razzel. Whether or not he is responsible for those murders isn't the issue. The issue is, why was no investigation conducted into those issues? We have a clear multiple murderer, and we have concerns about his association with particular women." Unquote. I've got to say that I totally disagree with Stephen Fulcher when he said that whether or not Christopher Halliwell is responsible for more murders is not the issue. Of course that is the issue. If he did commit more murders than he is convicted of, then there are families out there who haven't gotten justice for their loved ones. And if he is indeed behind the disappearance of Linda Razzel, that means that there's an innocent man in prison for that crime, and that of course is a massive issue. The Razzel family responded to Detective Fulcher's allegations, saying that they are satisfied that justice was served in Linda's case. Quote, "We were 100% happy with the police investigation. There is no doubt in our minds who the murderer was. There is no validity to the detective's claim." unquote. As of March 2021, Glenn Razzel remains in prison for Lisa's murder and still protests his innocence in the case. Another case that people suspect Christopher of being involved in is the disappearance of Sally Ann John. She was 24 years old when she went missing in Swindon on the 8th of September 1995. Sally Ann was a sex worker who would often pick up clients on Aylesbury Street, as it was in between the train station and the bus station, and this is the last place she was seen alive. Her case was treated as a missing persons inquiry until November 2014, when Wiltshire police announced that they were now investigating her case as a murder investigation as they had found, quote, significant new information, unquote. The following year they searched her last known address on Kimmeridge Close for clues, and 3 days after this search, 3 men in their 50s were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murdering Sally Ann, but they were all released the next day without charge. On the 20th of March 2017, police publicly revealed evidence in Sally Ann's case, hoping that it would lead to new tips and leads. The evidence was a postcard that was supposedly written by Sally Ann to one of her friends shortly after she disappeared. The postcard stated that Sally Ann had moved to London to start a new life, but police do not believe that Sally Ann wrote the letter, and they think that the key to cracking her case is to find its true author. D.S. Pocock, who is currently working on the case, said, quote, the postcard arrived in Swindon some 3 weeks after Sally Ann John went missing. There is still forensic opportunities with the postcard that we are exploring. We've had the handwriting analysed and the expert confirmed that it is not that of Sally Ann John. It's crucially important to find out who wrote the postcard. I believe the person who wrote the card was either misled or coerced into writing it. Or equally, it is the person responsible for her murder. It has been nearly 22 years since Sally disappeared. I appreciate that this is a long time, and no doubt friendships, relationships and lives will have changed dramatically since then. But if you have any information about what happened to Sally, it could be the missing piece to our jigsaw, unquote. Now, you are probably wondering where Christopher Halliwell fits into all of this. Well, one of Sally Ann's old friends has spoken to several newspapers about a particularly scary encounter she had with Christopher when she too was a sex worker in Swindon. Quote, I can't put my finger on it, but there was something about him that I didn't like. He put his hand round my neck in a way that creeped me out and made me scared. I told him I wasn't doing business with him and got out the car. He drove off and I walked all the way back to Swindon. That was the only time I remember seeing him, unquote. This woman was able to move to London to start a new life away from sex work and begged Sally Ann to join her. She told the Mirror, quote, when I left Swindon, I remember saying, please come with me, we can sort ourselves out together. But she didn't want to leave because she was too close to her mum. I got on a train to London and never saw or heard from her again, unquote. Sally Ann's friend is convinced that Christopher Halliwell was also one of Sally Ann's clients and believed that he was involved in her disappearance. Given what we know about Christopher, this is a very plausible theory, which is strengthened by information given to the media by one of Sally Ann's close family members. Quote, we've been briefed by the police that they are excavating 2 properties in Broad Street. But other than that, everyone has been kept very much in the dark. Of course we have wondered about Halliwell, everyone has, but we've been stonewalled by the police in the past. I've been told categorically by the police that he has not been in the frame for it, but now the police seem to be doing something. I've been told by people who knew Sally Ann that Christopher Halliwell at one point lived in a flat on Aylesbury Street where she was working when she disappeared. It would be amazing to get some answers finally after all these years, but I'm not holding my breath. It's been a long time now. I've not been too impressed with the police in the past, but they do seem to be making an effort now, although it's a bit late. It would be great if they found something that gave us some clue as to what happened to Sally Ann. We've been waiting for answers for 22 years now. We're just hoping this could be the breakthrough. I certainly wouldn't rule out the possibility that Halliwell killed Sally Ann, unquote. Now this search that Sally Ann's family member is talking about is the same search that I mentioned earlier on, that after Christopher Halliwell went to prison, his house on Broad Street was searched for clues. However, I do think it's very interesting that they chose to inform Sally Ann John's family that this search was taking place, because I don't know why they would do that if they didn't suspect that they could find something related to her disappearance in his house. While it is totally possible that Sally Ann was killed by another one of her clients that night, the fact that Christopher, who was known to hire sex workers, lived on the same street that she disappeared cannot be ignored. Wiltshire Police are now offering a £25,000 reward for information leading to the discovery of her body or a conviction in her case. So if you have any information that could help them, no matter how small it may seem, please contact the Metropolitan Police on 0800 056 0944. There have been other missing women who have been mentioned as being possible victims of Christopher Halliwell. However, there doesn't seem to be much of a connection between him and these women, other than the fact that they all went missing in Swindon, where Christopher lived for most of his life. Regardless, they are still missing people, so I'm going to tell you their names and any information I have on their disappearances. However, for most of them, few details are available. Nevertheless, here they are. Tina Pryor was 39 years old when she was last seen getting into a taxi in Trowbridge, Wiltshire in April 2001. It was speculated that when police started searching for a second woman on Whitehorse Hill following the discovery of Shan O'Callaghan's body, that police believed that they were looking for Tina Pryor and not Becky Godden, although that was pure speculation and Tina Pryor's body has never been found. Melanie Hall was 25 years old when she went missing after leaving the Cadillacs nightclub in Bath on the 9th of June 1996. Police have asked for the public's help in identifying a man and a woman matching Melanie's description, who were seen arguing on Old Orchard Road, which is right round the corner from the nightclub, sometime between 1:45 and 2 a.m. that morning. Police have released a composite of the man, who was described as being a white male, around 27 years old, standing at 5'10" and had a medium build. He had dark brown hair, dark brown eyes, bushy eyebrows and was clean shaven. He was wearing dark trousers, black shoes and a brown silk shirt. It is possible that he was wearing a gold hoop earring in his right ear and a flashy gold watch. While police do recognise that this was a long time ago, they are hoping that because England and Switzerland drew in the opening game of the Euro '96 Championships that night, that this evening would have stuck out in people's memories, and that hopefully someone who was at the Cadillac bar that night saw this argument and could come forward. Melanie's partial remains were found off the M5 motorway in 2009, however none of her clothes, jewellery or personal effects were found with her. Her cause of death could not officially be determined, however police know that she suffered blunt force trauma to her head and that she had been bound with blue rope, and police were able to get a partial DNA profile from this rope. 11 arrests have been made in her case, however nobody has been charged. 20-year-old Tai Hai Wen, who was originally from Vietnam, went missing in Swindon in 2005. She had only been in Swindon for a few weeks before she went missing, and because it was assumed that she either moved to a different area or returned home to Vietnam, her disappearance did not get a lot of media coverage. When I was looking into her case, I found an article from 2008 where a woman by the same name and 3 male gang members were all found guilty of conspiracy to produce cannabis. According to this article, which was written by the Swindon Advertiser, Tai Hai Wen did not attend her trial but was found guilty in absentia. It is important to note that I do not know for an absolute fact that this Tai is the same woman who went missing in 2005, but I think it's a safe assumption that it probably is. The article never mentioned that Tai was a missing person who hadn't been seen for 3 years prior to her conviction, but it is possible that police assumed she was on the run from these charges and that her disappearance wasn't given a lot of attention as a result. Sandra Bruin was 21 years old when she disappeared from her parents' house in Peatmore, Swindon in 1994. At the time of her disappearance, Sandra was writing to a prisoner serving time in a jail in Oxford, and her parents, John and Nora, believed that this could have had something to do with her disappearance. I don't know this prisoner's name, what his crimes were, or if Christopher Halliwell was in prison at this time. 44-year-old Ingrid O'Flanagan was due to meet a support worker at her home at 6:30 on the 19th of March 2011, but was not there and hasn't been seen since. The last possible sighting of her was 2 days earlier on Aylsham Road near her house. The fact that she had a support worker suggests that she required support with some aspect of her life, but I don't know anything about her life other than the fact that she required medication and was known to hitchhike. Ingrid's disappearance was discovered on the same day that Shan O'Callaghan was murdered, but it is important to note that we don't know for sure that something happened to Ingrid on this day, as the last sighting of her was on the 17th of March, so something could have happened to her on the 17th or the 18th. Although in saying this, it is not uncommon for serial murderers to kill 2 victims in a very short space of time. Other than this very loose connection, there is nothing else to link Christopher to Ingrid's case, and very little is known about her disappearance, which occurred exactly 10 years ago today. The fact that this episode is going live on the 19th of March is not a coincidence. Today is the 10th anniversary of Shan O'Callaghan's murder. It is also the 12th anniversary of when Claudia Lawrence disappeared, and the 19th anniversary of when Lisa Razzel was last seen. Last month, Claudia's father, Peter Lawrence, who has searched for his daughter for years, sadly died without ever knowing what happened to her. Personally, I don't believe that Shan and Becky are Christopher's only victims, and whether all, none, or some of the women we have discussed today were harmed by him, all of these women were murdered or are still missing. If there are any developments on these cases, or if Christopher is linked to any other murders, I will update you in a future episode. I know that this was a slightly different type of episode than what I usually do, and the only one like it that I have ever done before was episode 9 when we discussed the crimes of Terry Rasmussen. If you like this episode, please let me know, as I would like to keep this connected mini-series going. And please do remember that my case suggestions form is always in the description of my episodes. So if there are any killers that you are aware of that could be linked to unsolved cases, you can suggest that I cover those cases through that form. All photos and sources related to today's case can be found on our website, uncovertruecrimepodcast.co.uk. That is everything I have for you today. Thank you for listening till the very end. Please stay safe and have a good night.